A racist teacher insults and humiliates a black student because of his skin color and humble background, calling him "little monkey." When his father finds out, he becomes furious and goes to the school. Paul had always been a boy of few words, but his deep gaze revealed his kindness. From a young age, his life was marked by simplicity and affection, a home where love prevailed, even though life didn't offer many conveniences. Raised in a modest house in a neighborhood far from the city center, he learned early on to value what really mattered, the unity of his family and his parents' efforts to provide him with a better future. Jack, his father, was a man with calloused hands and quick steps, a product of years working as a mail carrier. On cold mornings or under the blazing sun, he could be found pedaling his bike along the sidewalks, carrying not only mail but also dreams and worries. Jack's routine was demanding, and he knew that, despite how honorable his job was, it would hardly provide his family with everything he wished for. Still, he never complained, as his greatest pride was being able to return home to see Paul's smile waiting for him at the door every day, eager to share the little adventures of his day. Susan, Paul's mother, was a woman with a serene demeanor but unmatched strength. She worked as a cleaner at a clinic, facing long hours of work, cleaning hallways that seemed endless. The exhausting routine didn't stop her from keeping the sparkle in her eyes when she talked about her son and the dreams she had for his future. At night, after getting home from work, Susan still found time to cook dinner and help Paul with his schoolwork because, for her, nothing was more important than seeing him thrive and follow a different path than the one she and Jack had known. Education had always been the greatest gift Susan and Jack could offer Paul. They knew it was his only chance to break the barriers that their simple life imposed on them. Thus, Paul grew up with a deep respect for school and for the teachers he saw as guides on his journey. He woke up early every day, facing the walk to school with determination, always taking care of his notebooks. So, Paul's life revolved around this simple yet meaningful routine. Little did he know that soon his life would change dramatically and painfully, challenging the tranquility he had known until then. But for now, he just wanted to believe that with effort and dedication, he could transform his destiny. That morning, the school was buzzing with murmurs and whispers. The news that a new teacher would take over the class had spread quickly through the hallways, and students were gathering in small groups, speculating about what he would be like. Paul sat in his usual spot at the back of the classroom, with some friends, observing the excitement around him. "I heard he's pretty different from the other teachers," said Kevin, one of Paul's closest friends, as he tried to adjust his notebook in the cramped desk. "They say he's kind of strict, but no one really knows for sure." Paul frowned, curious. "I hope he's a fair teacher, someone who won't nitpick us over everything," he said, not expecting much. "We've had enough of the principal's scoldings." "Ugh, if he's anything like they say, it's not going to be easy for us," Sophia said, turning around to join the conversation from her seat in front of them. "But I hope he's better than the last teacher." She was nice, but she couldn't control the class. Meanwhile, more students were arriving in the classroom, taking their seats. The discussion about the new teacher filled the air until the sound of the door opening interrupted the chatter. Everyone fell silent and turned to look. At the entrance stood a tall man with a stern expression, entering the room with a leather briefcase in one hand. He walked with firm steps to the front of the classroom, placing the briefcase on the desk with a sharp noise. It was Mr. Brandon. "Good morning, class," he said, his voice deep and lacking enthusiasm. "My name is Brandon, and I will be your teacher from now on. I expect us to maintain a relationship of respect and discipline in this classroom." Those words were delivered directly, almost coldly, with no trace of a smile. The students, still a bit startled, responded, albeit timidly, "Good morning, Mr. Brandon." Brandon looked around the room, his eyes sweeping each corner as if analyzing every student present. "I hope you're ready to learn. I do not tolerate misbehavior, and things will be different from what you're used to. From now on, everyone must do their part, understood?" The students exchanged glances, unsure how to react. Kevin whispered to Paul, "Looks like we're in for a problem, huh?" The guy doesn't even smile. Paul nodded, feeling a slight discomfort. Let's see how he handles the classes, maybe he's just really serious. But it quickly became clear that Brandon was more than just serious. He maintained a rigid and distant demeanor during lessons, never addressing the students with warmth or genuine interest. His explanations were quick and impatient, and any question that strayed from what he deemed relevant was met with disdain. However, what stood out the most was his attitude towards black students, especially Paul. Did you notice he always makes a point of ignoring what I say? Paul asked Kevin during one of the breaks between classes. It's like everything I do is wrong. Kevin looked at him with concern. Yeah, man, it's weird. It seems like he picks on you more than the others. Brandon didn't hide his contempt. On several occasions, he made snide comments about Paul's appearance or insinuated that he struggled with certain subjects due to a lack of effort. At first, Paul tried to brush it off, thinking it was just teasing, but over time, it became clear that there was something deeper at play. The way Brandon looked at him, with disdain, and how he always seemed to find a reason to reprimand him made Paul uncomfortable and, at times, humiliated in front of his peers. The fuse was lit on a day that seemed just like any other, but would forever be etched in Paul's memory and in the memories of everyone present. During math class, Paul, sitting next to Kevin, made a quiet comment to his friend about one of the problems on the board. Brandon, who was writing with his back to the class, abruptly turned around and, with a stern look, fixed his gaze on Paul. Paul, do you want to share with the class what's so important that it interrupts my explanation? Brandon shot back, his tone slicing through the air. Paul felt his face burn with embarrassment. I'm sorry, sir, I was just asking Kevin about the formula. I didn't quite understand. Brandon let out a cold laugh, full of contempt, that echoed off the walls. Sure. What else could I expect from you, right, Paul? Always with the excuse that you don't understand, always pretending you want to learn. People like you don't really try. You all want everything handed to you, as if the world owes you something. Paul swallowed hard. That's not it, sir. I just wanted to understand the exercise better. Brandon's expression hardened further, his eyes fixed on Paul as if he were a problem to be eliminated. Understand? Kid, do you really think you're capable of understanding anything? Look at you, Paul. Look at your skin, look at what you are. You'll never be like the others. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much effort you put in, you all end up in the same place. You don't have what it takes, you never did. Paul felt his stomach twist, but he tried to stand his ground. I just want a chance, sir, I want to study, Brandon cut him off with a sharp gesture, slamming his hand on the desk, making a noise that startled all the students. A chance? What good does it do to give a chance to someone who comes from the gutter? You're not like the others, Paul. Do you think you deserve to be here on the same level as them? You should be grateful for the luck you have. But no, you always want more, right? Kevin tried to intervene, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Sir, Paul was just trying to understand, he didn't mean to disrespect you. Brandon quickly turned to Kevin, cutting him off with a frosty glare. I didn't ask for your opinion, Kevin. You may not know this, but I've seen many like him. Always complaining, always saying it's hard, that they're victims. But the truth is, you don't know what hard work is. You, especially you, Paul, think that because you were born with that skin color, someone should feel sorry for you. Paul felt his eyes welling up, but he held back the tears. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me, sir. I just want to study and have a better future. Brandon stepped forward, leaning over Paul's desk as if he wanted to crush any trace of dignity that still remained in the boy. Future? What future do you think you'll have, huh? You think anyone is going to hire someone like you, coming from this miserable life, from all this poverty? Look at your clothes, look at the way you speak. You're never getting out of this, Paul. You think I don't know your dad is just a mail carrier, peddling through the dirty streets? And your mom, cleaning floors to earn a few crumbs? That's where you belong. And don't kid yourself thinking it'll be any different. Paul took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure, but the pain of Brandon's words was unbearable. Please, sir, don't talk about my parents. They do everything for me. The teacher raised an eyebrow, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Oh, of course, because you're the pride of your family, aren't you? The son who thought he could be something more than a hard-working little monkey. Do you really think you can compare yourself to the others here? Do you think you're worth as much as the students who have a real future? Don't be foolish, Paul. You should be grateful that I even waste my time trying to teach you anything. The classroom fell into a heavy silence, thick with tension. Paul's classmates looked at him, some shocked, others simply lowering their heads, too afraid to face the situation. Kevin opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't know how to defend his friend against such cruelty. Paul felt his heart racing, as if it would explode from pain and humiliation. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Tears streamed down his face, and unable to stay there any longer, he suddenly stood up, grabbed his notebook, and ran out of the room. As he passed through the door, he heard Brandon's voice echoing behind him, cold and full of disdain. Go on, Paul, run like the good little monkey you are. That's all you know how to do. Paul's sobs were muffled in the hallways as he distanced himself from the classroom. Behind him, the silence that hung over his classmates and Brandon's cold expression would be etched in everyone's memory, marking an episode that would forever change Paul's life. Paul arrived home with his face stained with tears, red eyes, and a tight chest. He could barely breathe from crying so much, and each step felt like a painful effort to keep himself upright. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he dropped his backpack on the floor of the living room, not caring about the noise it made hitting the ground. Jack, who was sitting on the small sofa, immediately stood up upon seeing his son's state. Paul, what happened, my son? Why are you crying like this? He asked, his voice filled with concern as he quickly approached. But Paul didn't respond. He walked past his father without even lifting his face and ran down the narrow hallway. Within seconds, he locked himself in his room, slamming the door behind him. Jack followed him but found the door shut. Paul, please, tell me what happened. Talk to me, son, he insisted, gently knocking on the door. You know you can trust me, you don't have to shut me out like this. From inside, he only heard Paul's muffled sobs. Jack's heart raced, a mix of frustration and pain at not understanding what had hurt his boy so deeply. He knocked again, this time with a bit more firmness. Paul, I just want to help. Please, tell me what's wrong. But silence was the only answer, and Jack, with a heavy sigh, decided to give his son some time, hoping he would calm down. A few hours later, the doorbell rang, and Jack went to answer it, still furrowing his brow in concern. When he opened the door, he found Kevin, who looked anxious and a bit hesitant. The boy was holding the strap of his backpack and looking at the ground, clearly uncomfortable. Kevin, right? What are you doing here, son? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice friendly but unable to hide his unease. Kevin looked up, his eyes visibly worried. I came to see Paul. He left school really upset today, and I was worried. I just wanted to know if he's okay. Jack frowned, suspicion starting to form in his mind. Do you know what happened to him, Kevin? He came home crying, locked himself in his room, and hasn't said anything to me. Kevin bit his lower lip, nervous. I think I know what happened, Mr. Jack. But it's complicated. I don't know if I should. Jack opened the door wider and stepped aside, indicating that Kevin should come in. Come in, kid. If you know what happened, I need you to tell me. Go ahead, sit over there, he said, pointing to a chair next to the small dining table. Kevin entered, hesitantly, and sat down in the chair, still holding his backpack on his lap. Jack sat across from him, crossing his arms. The expression on the man's face was one of pure anticipation, but a shadow of anger was already beginning to surface in his eyes. "Now, tell me, Kevin. What happened to Paul today?" Kevin took a deep breath, looking away for a moment before starting. "It was Mr. Brandon. He started treating Paul badly since he got to the school. At first, we thought it was just his way, that he was stricter, but he started to pick on Paul a lot. He said he didn't try hard enough, that he should be grateful just to be in school. But today was much worse." Jack narrowed his eyes, trying to control the growing anger boiling in his chest. "Worse how? What exactly did he say, Kevin?" Kevin lowered his head, speaking in an almost whispered tone, as if he feared repeating the words. "Today, in class, Paul was talking to me about an exercise, and the teacher turned around and started yelling at him. He said that people like him, that people like Paul, because of his skin color, would never be equal to the others. He told Paul that he should know his place, that he shouldn't expect the same as the other students." Jack's face grew harder, his fists clenching. "He talked about my son's skin color. He dared to say that in front of everyone?" Kevin nodded, fear evident in his voice. "Yes, Mr. Jack. He said horrible things. He called Paul a little monkey, said his dad only knew how to ride a bike delivering mail and that his mom only knew how to clean floors. He said Paul should be grateful to be in the classroom and that he would never be like the others because he was born to be poor." Jack felt his blood boil, and his face turned red with anger. He stood up abruptly, the chair creaking beneath him. "That man. He said that in front of everyone, and no one did anything. And you, Kevin, why didn't you react?" Kevin lowered his head even further, ashamed. I tried to defend Paul, but the teacher, he told me to shut up. And the others were scared to speak up. The whole class went silent while he was insulting Paul. It was horrible, Mr. Jack. I just wanted you to know what happened." Jack took a deep breath, trying to maintain control, but every word from Kevin only fueled the fury in his chest. He ran his hands through his hair, struggling to suppress the urge to run out right then and confront that teacher. "Thank you for coming, Kevin. I need to think about what to do. Paul can't see you right now, he's too shaken up. But when he calms down, I'll let him know you came." Kevin nodded, getting up and slowly walking to the door. "I hope Paul will be okay, Mr. Jack. I'm going home now." Jack followed him to the exit, closing the door right after, but his face wore a determined expression. He sat down at the table, fists clenched, as he waited for Susan to arrive. When she finally came home, the tired expression on her face vanished upon seeing the tension in the house. "Jack, what happened? What's going on?" Jack had her sit down, trying to contain the fury in his voice as he recounted everything he had heard from Kevin. With each word, Susan's face transformed in shock and pain until tears began to stream down her cheeks. "He said that to our son. He called our boy a little monkey. How could he, Jack? This is monstrous." Jack shook his head, his eyes burning with rage, speaking with a determination Susan had never seen before. "I'm not going to wait, Susan. I can't. That man humiliated our son in front of everyone, made him feel worthless because of his skin color and our humble life. I'm going to that school right now, and he's going to have to face me." Susan's eyes widened, surprised by her husband's sudden decision. "Jack, wait. I know you're furious, but wouldn't it be better to think this through a little first? What if you get into bigger trouble?" Jack could no longer hear his wife's pleas. He started pacing back and forth in the living room, fists clenched, breathing heavily. "I've thought about it enough, Susan. That teacher is not getting away with what he did to Paul. I'm going over there now, and he's going to have to look me in the eye and understand the pain he caused our son." Susan wiped her tears, but her expression was still one of concern. She got up and grabbed Jack's arm, trying to calm him down. I understand your anger, Jack, but I'm afraid of what you might do. What if something goes wrong? What if you end up hurting someone? Think about Paul, think about our family. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath, but soon shook his head again. I'm thinking about Paul, Susan. Every word that kid, Kevin, told me, every insult that man said, just makes me want to resolve this once and for all. Paul can't keep hiding, crying alone in his room, while that bastard goes unpunished. I'm going to confront him right now. Susan realized she wouldn't be able to convince her husband to wait. She slowly released his arm, resigned. Then go, Jack. But please, be careful. Do what you need to do, but come back home safely. Our son needs you. Jack looked deeply into Susan's eyes, and for a moment his expression softened. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her forehead, a gesture that mixed anger and affection. I promise, Susan. I promise I'll come back. But first, that man is going to understand what it means to mess with my son. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket hanging behind the door, opened it forcefully, and stepped out of the house, walking firmly on the pavement. The cold night air hit his face, but it couldn't cool the fire burning in his chest. As he walked toward the school, each step was fueled by rage and the certainty that he couldn't let this act of injustice go unchallenged. Jack arrived at the school with steady steps, his face hard and his fists still clenched. His whole body was tense, driven by an anger he had never felt before. The night was beginning to fall, but the dim lights in the hallways were still on, illuminating his path as he searched for the man who had made his son suffer like this. Turning a corner, he encountered a woman who appeared to be a school staff member, maybe an assistant or secretary. Without hesitating, he approached her. Excuse me, do you know if Mr. Brandon is still at school? Jack asked, his voice firm and impatient. His eyes shone with a fury that the woman sensed immediately. She looked a bit confused and took a step back but eventually responded. Yes, he's in room 14 at the end of the hall, grading assignments. But why? Jack didn't wait for her to finish her question. Thanks. And without further explanation, he turned and started running down the hall, his footsteps echoing off the walls. The woman, sensing the urgency and tension on his face, grew anxious. Something in his expression made her fear what could happen. Without thinking much, she ran after him, calling his name, trying to catch up. Jack reached the indicated room and burst through the door with all his might, the wood slamming against the wall with a crash that echoed through the hallway. Mr. Brandon, who was alone in the room, sitting at the desk grading some tests, immediately looked up, surprised and irritated by the interruption. What's going on? Who are you to barge in like this? Brandon began to say, but he didn't have time to finish. Jack lunged at him like a hurricane. Are you Mr. Brandon? He shouted, the words coming out like a roar. Before Brandon could respond, Jack grabbed him by the shirt and yanked him out of the chair, throwing him against the wall. Brandon tried to break free, but Jack was faster, delivering a straight punch to his face. The teacher stumbled, knocking over a few chairs in the process, but Jack didn't stop. With each blow, his voice grew louder, more furious. You had the guts to humiliate my son. To talk about his color. To treat him like he's less than the others. Brandon attempted to protect his face by raising his arms, but Jack's punches were fierce, each one carrying the weight of his frustrations and his son's suffering. Please, stop, let's talk. Brandon pleaded, his voice trembling as he tried to catch his breath. But Jack wouldn't listen. He grabbed the teacher by the collar and threw him against the wooden table, which splintered on impact. You said my son should be content with his place. That he has no worth for being black, for being poor. Who do you think you are to treat my boy like garbage? As Brandon tried to get up, dazed and with his face already bleeding, the woman who had followed Jack rushed into the room, alarmed. Oh my God, what are you doing? Please stop, she shouted, trying to pull Jack's arm but unable to contain his strength. She ran to the door and started shouting for help, her words echoing down the hall. "Help! Someone, quick! He's going to kill him!" Jack, however, didn't stop. He grabbed Brandon by the hair and pulled him up, looking directly into his swollen, frightened eyes. "You had the audacity to call my son a little monkey? To say he would never escape poverty, that he should be ashamed of our life? You think you can walk all over people just because you wear a suit and teach classes? Today, you're going to feel what it's like to be humiliated." With one more punch, Brandon fell to the floor, now completely defenseless. He tried to raise his hand in a gesture of supplication, but Jack wouldn't let him finish. He delivered a hard kick to his stomach, causing the teacher to double over in pain. "You destroyed my son's hope. You made him lock himself in his room, crying, thinking he's worth nothing. I'm going to teach you what it feels like to hurt, Brandon." Slowly, other people began to arrive in the room, drawn by the shouting. Several staff members attempted to separate the two, but Jack's rage was so overwhelming that he continued hitting Brandon, who was now semi-conscious on the floor. Each punch was accompanied by a cry of outrage, as if the words could release all the pain he and his family felt. "You think you're better than the others just because you use fancy words, because you pretend to be cultured?" Jack raged. "Well, today I'm going to show you that those who have no heart deserve no respect." Finally, after a few minutes that felt like an eternity, several men managed to pull Jack away from Brandon, who was now motionless, his face swollen from the blows. They held Jack tightly, separating him from the teacher. The woman who had followed Jack was in tears, while one of the staff members tried to wake Brandon, who was unresponsive. Jack, still panting, with red eyes from anger and tears, looked at Brandon's lifeless body on the floor and spat to the side, feeling no remorse. Now he knows what it's like to suffer, what it's like to be treated like nothing. The woman's screams continued as she called the police, and a few minutes later, the officers arrived at the school. They handcuffed Jack, who didn't resist but held his head high, staring at the unconscious teacher with a mix of hatred and a strange sense of relief. After the assault, Jack was taken outside the school and placed in the back of the squad car. As the police escorted him, he didn't say a word, but his expression made it clear that he regretted nothing about what he had done. When questioned about his actions, he detailed the offenses that Brandon had made against Paul, repeating each of the cruel words the teacher had said. He spoke of the humiliation his son had suffered and the pain of seeing him emotionally shattered. Paul was called to the station to testify, and there, in front of the officers, he confirmed in detail every racist humiliation he had endured at Brandon's hands. Other students who had witnessed the attacks also gave their testimonies, corroborating Paul's story, recounting how the teacher frequently used derogatory language and showed clear disdain for black students. With all this evidence, Jack was released on the condition that he would respond to the charges while free, while Brandon faced serious consequences. The teacher was immediately fired, banned from teaching again, and ordered to pay a significant fine as compensation to Paul and his family. The punishment carried considerable financial weight, but for Susan and Jack, it didn't seem enough. They believed Brandon should face criminal charges for his racist and humiliating behavior, but thanks to the skillful intervention of the teacher's lawyer, this was the only punishment imposed on him. Although justice did not feel complete in the eyes of Paul's family, the case left a deep mark on their lives and in the small town where it all happened. Paul knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but now he was certain he wouldn't face the challenges alone. And, above all, he knew that his parents' love was an unbreakable shield against the pain of the world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.